Good morning. Welcome everyone. We will start in less than 2 minutes. Please stay with us. Thank you very much for joining us today on this seminar on Incoterms 2020 by ICC partnership with DABSA. Thank you very much to DABSA for joining us today as a partner. And first of all, I will invite Mr. Rashid Al-Matroushi, who is Manager of Customer Relationship Department of DABSA, to give his welcome remarks. Please, over to you, Mr. Rashid Al-Matroushi.
Thank you, Habib. First of all, good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's been doing well, and thank you so much for giving us your time this morning. Thank you for ICC UAE to be on board with us. I'll just give a couple of brief remarks, and then I'll hand over the floor to Mr. Vincent O'Brien, who will take you on a more in-depth insights about the Incoterms 2020. So a little bit about the ICC. So the ICC is the World Business Organization working with members to secure peace, prosperity, and expansion of trade and business opportunities across the globe, and is an internationally connected community of members representing more than 45 million business entities in over 100 countries across the globe. So the mission of ICC is to make business work for everyone, every day, everywhere. So the ICC have an ICC UAE office, and ICC UAE is the national committee of the ICC and your gateway for connection to the International Chamber of Commerce. And its members represent, support, and protect business interests within the UAE. ICC UAE also pushes forward policies and practices that expedite the expansion of trade, businesses within the UAE, in the region, and internationally. So a little bit about Incoterms 2020. Incoterms literally means the international commercial terms. And the Incoterms are rules of practice which are used mainly for the import and export of goods between countries on a daily basis. The new Incoterms 2020 was released on the 1st of January in 2020. And a little bit, I'll be giving you a small brief introduction about Mr. Vincent, who will be taking you forward through the rest of the presentation. Mr. Vincent is the acting director at the ICC UAE and is an executive committee member of the ICC Banking Commission. He has more than a quarter of a century international trade banking experience and has delivered trade finance technical assistance and training in more than 100 countries worldwide. Vincent is also a director of the Institute of International Banking Law and Practice in Washington, USA, where he provides guidance on international trade rules and often acts as expert witness in international trade disputes. So without further ado, I'll hand over the floor to Mr. Vincent to take you on a more depth insight on the Incoterms and how you can benefit from it. And thank you so much once again for your time. Mr. Vincent, please.
Thank you very much, Rashid, for the wonderful introduction, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to present these important rules to your members at DABSA. And again, a great opportunity to be partnering with DABSA because we're all in the same boat. We're all here to promote trade and to lift our companies across the globe. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for participating in our Incoterms 2020 event. As Rashid said, these are a book of rules. So this is what the little book actually looks like. And it's kind of a handbook that anyone serious in international trade will have. They are doing their business on a day-to-day basis. This is the new book. And of course, this was the old book, which you may have been familiar with, Incoterms 2010. But the rules were updated to reflect the best practice in international contracting and in agreeing international contract terms around the globe. And as Rashid said, they are a book of rules, which means that even though we take them for granted a little bit sometimes, Incoterms, things like EXW, FOB, CIF, but when something goes wrong or there's a dispute between the parties, and it goes to court or arbitration, then it becomes very serious because the parties involved or the legal system will say, well, what exactly did the rule you agreed say? So that's when the express rules become really, really important. But just a word about how we develop these rules. The ICC, the International Chamber of Commerce, World Business Organization, strength, our big strength is in our members, because the expertise comes from our members who are practitioners from all around the world. So we have input from all the countries in the world into how the rules should actually operate. So this is probably the most powerful thing I feel about these rules and why they're so effective. They represent a global voice developed for our members. So maybe if some of you are interested, you'd be more than welcome to join us as we develop new rules and evolve new rules of practice. So regarding the Incoterms rules, I'm going to take you through a structured seminar, and please feel free to ask any questions as we go in the Q&A, and then we will have a quiz when we come near the end to delve deeply into some of the key issues on Incoterms. So now I'm going to actually share my screen with you, and then I will take you through the presentation, the core presentation on Incoterms 20. What we're really talking about is a book of rules, and the cover of the book is in front of you on the screen right now. And basically when you look at it, it tells you what it's about. These are ICC rules for the use of domestic and international trade terms. The first thing to be very clear about is, in reality, these terms are used in every single country in the world every day for international business. They are also used for domestic business within a jurisdiction or country, but to a much lesser level. So even though they're increasing in use for domestic trade, they really are still international commercial terms. But again, we're all here about international business, whether it's ICC or whether it is DAVSA. When we look at the rule book in a little bit more detail, we see that the rule book evolved from the earlier version, Incoterms 2010. And here is a screenshot from an ICC website. And I'm not going to take you through all of it, but basically it highlights that these are rules for everyone who's involved in international business or in the international sale of goods from one country to another, one jurisdiction to another. So basically, this says that the Incoterms are the language of international trade. Well, I would actually go one step further, and I would say that the Incoterms are like the ABC of international trade. Now, the ABC is very basic. It's a kindergarten concept. But think about it. ABC, 3 letters. If you don't know your ABC in whatever language, you cannot communicate. So again, Incoterms, the Incoterms rules are a book of rules, and each rule is 3 letters, like ABC, but now we have EXW, FOB, CIF, DPU, and DDP. So basically, these are the foundations of international trade and finance, okay? Particularly trade. A little bit of history, but short, because short is good. Research into the Incoterms started in the early 20s, but the first version was Incoterms published in 1936. The rules then were revised 6 times, and the latest version, as you know, is Incoterms 2020, which became effective globally across the world on the 1st of January 2020. So now a little bit more detail about the Incoterms rules as we go through them. On your screen in front of you, on the right-hand side, you should see something that basically is Incoterms 2020 rules and a little box around it. And then if we look on the other side of the screen, we actually see that we have the Incoterms 2010 rules. So just to give you one little highlight, one side of the screen is from Incoterms 2020, and the other one is Incoterms 2010. Highlight some key point here. In the Incoterms 2020 rules, you will notice at A2 and A3, delivery and transfer of risk have been brought up in the priorities in the new Incoterms rules. It was always there, but these are 2 critical points, 2 critical issues for Incoterms. When the seller has delivered the goods, when the buyer has taken delivery of the goods. So these now are getting higher prominence in the new version of the rules, Incoterms 2020. So while we are here, it's good to remember that in the rule book, there are 11 Incoterms rules, 11 Incoterms rules. And for each of the 11 rules, there is something like this for each of the rules. A1 to A10, obligations of the seller under the particular Incoterm. B1 to B10, obligations of the buyer under each of the individual Incoterms. So now you know, first published 1936, revised 6 times. Each Incoterm is 3 letters, okay? On each Incoterm, there are 10 key points. A1 to A10, obligations of seller. B1 to B10, obligations of the buyer. When we look a little bit at the evolution of Incoterms, but I'll keep it short because the most important thing is familiarization with the current rules, but a bit of background will give you context. On the left side of the screen, you see Incoterms 2000, a long time ago, nearly 20 years ago. And we see that what was removed was DAF, DES, DEQ, and DDU in the revision to Incoterms 2010. Now it gets more practical and more interesting. In the revision of Incoterms 10, the number of Incoterms was reduced from 13 to 11. And in that 11, we had 2 new Incoterms, DAT and DAP. DAP and DAT. So basically, as a seller, DAP would mean delivered at place, and DAT would mean delivered at terminal. Now, don't worry, I will be going into some detail in what these exactly mean in a small point in time. Okay. So when we move forward and we're looking at Incoterms 2020, now you could read many long articles about the changes, but I'm going to give you the key changes in a nutshell. Very, very quickly. When we look at change from our evolution from Incoterms 2010 to Incoterms 2020, key points you actually need to remember. Number 1, we no longer have DAT. Delivered at terminal is no longer in the rules. And we have now instead, or the evolution from DAT, delivered at terminal, was an evolution to DPU, delivered at place unloaded. Okay, I'll explain more detail a little bit later. And another change that's subtle but very important to air shipments and multimodal transport, and that will be the Incoterm CIP. Little bit of history. In the past, in the previous version of Incoterms, under CIF and CIP, the rule actually stated that the CIF, CIP, the I stands for insurance. The insurance only had to be on minimum terms. But now, and I don't want to cause any confusion, but just more detail later, under CIP, the insurance should be at a higher level. And of course, this is important if you're shipping goods by air, as so many of you are, because now the requirement is that the insurance should be at CIP, Institute Cargo Clause A, all risk cover or an equivalent. Whereas under CIF, cost insurance and freight, a marine term, it remains under minimum term. Okay, now for a little bit more clarity, these were significant changes, and we have a renaming of DAT to DP. The exporter is in Ireland. Different countries, different jurisdictions, different laws, different regulations. It is impossible for you to know all regulations around the world, but the Incoterms provide you with the foundations. The Incoterms are first published in 1936, as we said, but really to highlight that they are international rules. And actually, I see I have a question coming in, and I think I'll answer it now. I will just ask, are Incoterms laws? Well, a very good question, because Incoterms, to be clear, are not laws. They are voluntary rules in that the seller and buyer volunteer or they incorporate them in the international contract of sale. So then the rules become part of the international contract of sale. So if there is a dispute, a legal dispute, the courts will look to the rules for clarification. But very good question, they're not actually laws, but they can have a legal effect. Moving forward a little bit in our presentation on Incoterms. On our screen, we have the 11 Incoterms here. And as we can see, the various Incoterms can be used for different modes of shipment, different modes of carriage. So I'm going to talk maybe a little bit about this as we go forward. Traditionally, marine Incoterms were used extensively, but now with the importance of air freight and other means of transport, multimodal transport, we are seeing an expansion, a significant expansion from the traditional marine terms, moving into multimodal questions. And here we have another question. So the question is, can we still use Incoterms 2010? Because many of our contracts say Incoterms 2010. And the answer is yes. As I said, these are voluntary rules, okay? So if you're using Incoterms 2010 as a seller and the buyer agrees to the contract, it's no problem. It's absolutely fine. But the only thing is that the rules have been updated to reflect modern practices and some issues that may have evolved over time. So basically, Incoterms 2020 will be the preferred book of rules to apply. But yes, your specific question, can you continue to use Incoterms 2010? Yes, you can. Moving forward, and I have a few more questions coming in, but I want to cover some ground before I answer them, if that's okay. I won't forget. It's all about delivery and transfer of risk between seller and buyer. And actually, in most international trade transactions, movement of goods, nothing goes wrong, but occasionally, as you well know, sometimes something goes wrong. For example, imagine I'm an exporter exporting under FOB, Hamburg port. The goods are actually loaded on board a vessel. The bill of lading, transport document, is issued and provided to the seller. The goods are shipped on board, but then this terrible accident happens, as you see on your screen, and actually the goods get damaged. So the question could be whose risk is it? Whose responsibility? Well, as a buyer, I wouldn't probably naturally say, well, the ship hasn't even sailed yet, so it's obviously the seller's responsibility, okay? But as a seller, I might think, well, hang on, I've kind of shipped the goods on board, so they're gone. So it's the buyer's responsibility. That's why we have the rules. So for example, if it was FOB, under delivery, it would tell us under the rule, goods delivered when placed on board the vessel. Transfer of risk, the rule would tell us risk transfers from seller to buyer once the goods are placed on board the vessel at the port of shipment. So that was just one little practical example to show you the importance of the Incoterms. So I'm going to ask you a question, but you can just answer it yourself in the chat. I won't linger. But imagine, and I know I haven't covered it yet, but I just want you to think about it, and I'll give you some feedback on your answers. Okay, imagine we have a seller, and he is selling to Karachi in Pakistan, Karachi port in Pakistan. And now he's using this new Incoterm, DPU. DPU unloaded. Okay, unloaded, DPU unloaded. And the seller, the goods are actually the goods you see highlighted on your screen now. But actually they're still on board the vessel, the smaller ship, as it's coming into Karachi port, okay? So the goods are not actually, someone has typed the word here, unloaded. So whose responsibility would be? Whose risk, seller or buyer? And excellent, excellent. I'm getting feedback here. Everyone got the answer right. DPU, the seller is responsible to deliver the goods, including, excellent, more people have answered, including unloading of the goods. So until the actual goods are unloaded, it is still with the seller. Now we get back to our Incoterms. Just a little quick point. On the left-hand side of your screen, as you're looking at it, you see 4 of the Incoterms. EXW, FCA, FAS, FOB. Now, this is not technical explanation, but these terms, EXW, FCA, FAS, FOB, you could call them on the side of the exporter or seller. It kind of starts and finishes in the country of the seller or the exporter. But then on the other side of your screen, you have CIP, CPT, DAP, etc. And they're more on the seller's side. So what they mean is the seller is taking responsibility for the carriage of the goods to a designated named port of destination or named place of destination. But bear with me, all will become clear as I go through the particular Incoterms. We have Incoterms rules depending on the mode of transport. Okay, depending on the mode of transport. So on your screen, you can see EXW, FCA, DAP, CPT, CIP, DPU, DDP. They're used for any mode of transport, including multimodal transport. But then, as I mentioned, we have the traditional marine terms, which are for sea or inland waterway. And these are the traditional terms most people are so familiar with. FAS, free alongside ship, FOB, CIF, CFR. Okay. Now I think it's time to really get down to business, and we go through the individual Incoterms. Now I'm not going to go through all the 11 because I think we would need a day and a half. I will go through the key fundamentals, the most commonly used terms, and of course be very clear and precise with precision on the new Incoterm, which was DPU. Now, on your screen, oh, and I have a few comments coming in. I'm just going to take a look at them and see what we've got. Okay, and yes, very good, very good. The chat, yeah, excellent. Oh, okay, a few questions I've got. One is regarding title of goods. One is regarding freight charges, and the other one is regarding payment, but I'm coming to them, so bear with me, but I will answer them as we go forward. We have 11 Incoterms, and on your picture, we have a little diagram. So it's to explain Incoterms. On the left-hand side of the screen, we should have the seller with the goods. And on the right-hand side of the screen, we have the buyer with the money. Okay, great. And the buyer with the money. And the whole idea, of course, is we contractually do a contract to agree the goods transfer to the buyer and the money from the buyer to the seller. Then with the seller on the left-hand side of my screen, as I look at it, we have a little blue truck. That is local transport in the country of export. Then we have the blue flag house. That is actually export clearance formalities. Then we have loading. Then we have international carriage, unloading, customs, import formalities, local transport, and we have the buyer with the money. So I will come back to this a little bit later. So for example, we see the Incoterm used quite extensively in domestic trade, also in international, but not so much. And that is EXW, X works named place. And then we have three dimensions here. We have carriage of the goods from seller to buyer. We have delivery and risk transfer between seller and buyer. And then we have costs. Who pays the cost between seller and buyer? And then we have one red line for export clearance, and we have another one for import clearance. And these are the key variables. Now, once I cover X works, I go back and look at the questions and your comments. And so bear with me. So basically, I'm a seller in Ireland. You want to buy a machine from me. I give you a price. My currency, I'm in Ireland. It's euro. So I give you the price, 50,000 euro, EXW, X works Dublin, Incoterms 2020. Well, in respect of carriage of goods, I have no obligation. In respect of delivery and risk, the goods are delivered at my premises, so the risk is all yours, the buyer, in a foreign country, maybe in the UAE. And there is no additional cost because I just provide the goods at my premises available for the buyer. You know, in X works, seller's premises, I'm not even responsible for loading the goods on board the buyer's means of conveyance. So basically, the buyer has all the risk and cost. Moving forward, on to the next Incoterm, and this is FCA. But before I cover FCA, I'm going to look at some of the questions and answers coming through, and I will just maybe reply. Oh, very good. Okay. Someone asked, will we share the questions and answers? Yes, we will. Okay. Someone asked me, where can we get the Incoterms book, latest version? You would have seen my colleague Habib at the introduction for a few seconds. Habib, ICC UAE can provide you with the book. Okay. Yes. And now I'm coming to the questions regarding title, etc. So I'll move forward, if you don't mind. If I give you the Incoterm EXW and you're in the UAE, most likely it's not going to be suitable for you in normal circumstances. But you may say to me, Mr. O'Brien, could you give us the Incoterm FCA? So this would mean FCA, free carrier name place. So for example, I'm shipping the goods by air from Dublin to Dubai, okay? So if you ask for an FCA price, it will be free carrier Dublin name place. Now this is much better for you as a buyer, because under free carrier named place, the seller must deliver the goods from his factory or his premises to the designated nominated carrier nominated by the buyer. So I get the goods from my factory to Dublin Airport, and of course, as you know, Emirates normally fly from Dublin Airport direct to Dubai. I hand the goods into the custody of the carrier or the carrier's agent. I obtain the transport document. Goods going by air, it's going to be the airway bill, FCA free carrier. So under FCA, the seller is responsible for delivering the goods into the custody of the designated named carrier. Okay, so I'm waiting for my PowerPoint to react. Oh yeah. Okay, so deliver the goods into the custody of the carrier. I get the airway bill. Once the goods are delivered at Dublin Airport, the risk transfers from seller to buyer. Not in Dubai. At Dublin Airport, once the goods are handed into the custody of the carrier, the first carrier, the seller pays the cost of getting the goods to the carrier, including export clearance. So remember, under all F terms, F, it stands for free, okay? Even though in this life we know nothing is free, but F stands for free carrier. The seller is always responsible for export clearance formalities, FCA named place. FES is a marine term, so and I'm going to be very short about this because it's not used extensively, but where it is used, it's used in the commodity trade, where a seller or a buyer will be buying and selling commodities. And under FAS, the buyer typically will be chartering a vessel, hiring a vessel for a time charter or a voyage charter to collect the goods or pick up the goods at a port of shipment or a port of loading. Very briefly, FAS, named port of shipment. So the seller must deliver the cargo alongside the ship on the quay at the port of shipment. And of course, the risk transfers to the buyer at the same place, and the seller is responsible for all costs from that point going forward. So the seller is responsible for the carriage of the goods, import clearance, unloading, etc. Very short and brief. Moving forward to a more important term, one that is used extensively all over the world. But just to highlight, because it may be important to you in DAFSA, FOB is a marine term. It was designed for marine shipments, inland, waterway, or marine, ocean, sea voyages. If you were shipping by air, well, FOB is not really the right term. The equivalent term is the one we already mentioned, FCA free carrier. FOB, marine term. Under FOB, free on board, the seller must get the goods from his premises to the port, past export clearance, shipped on board, obtain the customary transport document. So if it's FOB, what would the customary transport document? If anyone would like to type in on the chat what they think it is. And, oh, yes, you are very good. Of course, it's a bill of lading. So a bill of lading will be issued showing the goods have been shipped on board. Risk transfers from seller to buyer when the goods are placed on board the vessel at the port of shipment, and the seller is responsible for all costs. Now, back to one of my questions. The question was regarding freight charges under FOB. Well, all freight charges are for account of the buyer. Freight charges, account of the buyer. So someone mentioned the bill of lading. So basically, the bill of lading, my expectation will be under FOB that the bill of lading will be marked freight paid, or perhaps maybe freight paid, FOB, a marine term. Moving forward, CFR, cost and freight, name, port of destination. Now you will see there is a slight difference. We see that in terms of carriage, under the C terms, the seller is responsible for organizing and paying for the contract of carriage to the named port of destination. So it could be CFR, Jebel Ali Port, okay? Now, where does risk transfer? There's a big misconception under the C terms. Because it's CFR, port of destination, many times the buyer perceives the risk transfers from seller to buyer when the goods are delivered at the port of destination. But actually, and this is very important in the current environment that with COVID-19 and claims of force majeure, important to understand under the rule, the seller has delivered when the goods are placed on board the vessel at the port of shipment. Risk transfers from the seller to that point, even though the seller is paying for the contract of carriage to the named port of destination. And of course, import clearance charges, inland charges are for the account of the buyer. Okay. And I've one or two more questions coming in, but I'm going to wait just till I cover the next Incoterm, if that is okay with you. Very nice ship sailing there. Moving on to the next term, which is also used extensively, and my timing is still quite good. Okay, CIF, named port of destination. So the I obviously stands for insurance. So the seller gives a CIF price. So the seller now must organize and pay the insurance premium covering the shipment of the goods from seller to buyer. And the minimum cover under the rules is 110% of the CIF value. Now, very interestingly, once I hit CIF, the number of questions I got and comments has doubled in the space of 5 seconds. So please bear with me while I just have a look at the questions and answers and the chat, just that I make sure I'm covering all the important stuff. Okay. Yes. Okay. Great. 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 Oh, if you don't mind, just in case I forget it, I have a really important question and I want to answer it because you are my priorities, our members and participants. Members are always the priority. Here is the question. Okay. Mr. O'Brien, under FCA, remember, free carrier. And my example, I give FCA Dublin Airport, Dublin, Ireland, okay? Because it was easy to understand and time is short. But let's answer your question. I was asked a specific question. Under FCA, can the named place be the warehouse of the seller? The seller or the exporter? Now that's a very good question. And the exact answer is yes. Under FCA, free carrier, the delivery place can be at the seller's premises. Now this sounds a little bit like X Works, doesn't it? Seller's premises. But the key difference is here. This is a rule. So if we use FCA seller's premises, because it's an F term, remember F term, the seller is automatically responsible for all export clearance formalities, where under X Works, no responsibility. But also under FCA, you remember that if it's FCA seller's premises, he is now responsible for loading on the buyer's means of conveyance. So it's a very good question, and actually you are thinking exactly the right way. FCA is a very useful term for buying or picking up goods from the seller warehouse if you are the buyer. Now back to CIF, cost, insurance and freight, named port of destination. Seller organizes carriage of the goods to the named port of destination. So it's going to be freight paid. Transfer of risk, very interesting. The transfer of risk from seller to buyer is actually at the port of shipment, otherwise called the port of loading. And we see that now on your screen, even though the seller is paying the cost from the seller to the buyer. So seller is responsible for organizing the insurance of the goods, as you can see on your screen. Now, I'm watching my time, but I think I'm okay to do a very historic case study for you. So here is a very important story. Some years back, there was an exporter in the UK, in England, exporting to a buyer in Poland. They agreed the term CIF, Gdynia Port in Poland. CIF, cost insurance and freight. Now, regarding payment, the seller said to the buyer, send me the money and then I will ship you the goods CIF. The buyer said, that's a good idea, but I have a better idea. Send me the goods, then I will send you the money when you deliver CIF. So we have a blockage between the seller and the buyer. Both are nervous about the risk. So they agreed that the settlement would be by means of an irrevocable letter of credit. And it appeared, hopefully, on your screen. I've made it short because short is good. But to give you the story, the buyer's bank in Poland issued a letter of credit on behalf of the buyer, irrevocable undertaking to pay $3.7 million. Available by side payment with a bank in London. Side payment means goods shipped, documents present, bank check, documents comply, bank must pay even before the goods arrive at the port of destination. The letter of credit was confirmed, and I know this may not be something you're not familiar with, but let's just say the exporter's bank also guaranteed to make payment if the documents comply. You can see the goods description on the screen, quick dry cement, CIF. Documents required. The seller must always provide an invoice, so the letter of credit, signed invoice in triplicate, insurance policy 110%. Goods are going by sea, marine bill of lading, called for in the letter of credit. And then the buyer was a clever guy because it's the first time he had bought this cement from this seller, so there was an inspection certificate, pre-shipment inspection certificate required. Now, why is this case so interesting? Because of the rules. Here is what happened. Goods were shipped on board at Southampton. Bills of lading are issued. Seller insures the goods. Issues the invoice. Ship is sailing to Gdynia port in Poland. Everything great. But then there was a storm. The sea got rough. Water got into the ship. So the cement powder became a rock, solidified. So cement powder did not arrive in Gdynia port in Poland, okay? $3.7 million, okay? It's just a rock arrived in Gdynia port in Poland. So the buyer did not want to pay. Now, to be honest, if I got a rock instead of cement powder, to be honest, I would not want to pay either. But I have a contractual obligation, and it's based on Incoterms rules. CIF. Now, I want to keep this story short. So here's what happened next. The buyer with their bank managed to get a court injunction. Now, this is important because this is a problem surfacing in the world today with all the issues regarding delivery, force majeure, etc. The buyer managed to get a court order stopping the bank from paying in the UK. Documents presented, invoice 3.7 million, documents comply, but the court order stopped the bank from paying. So this goes back to your question. Are Incoterms, are these laws? No, they're important rules, but if a court issues a court order stopping payment, the court order or the legality, the legal laws will supersede the rules. But bear with me, interesting story. The seller contested the court injunction in court. And very interestingly, a very famous judge at the time, Lord Denning, clarified that two books of ICC rules are involved here. One is the Incoterms rules, and the other one is UCP, Uniform Custom and Practice for Documentary Credits. So in a very short time, a very short number of days, the judge ruled bank must pay because the letter of credit is subject to ICC rules, which states banks deal with documents. If the documents comply, bank must pay. Exporter got his money. Then regarding the contract, Lord Denning said CIF, named port of destination, under the rule, delivery, the seller delivers when the goods are placed on board the vessel at the port of shipment. So the seller got the money, the buyer got the someone put in here, the rock, but he also got the insurance and was able to insure a claim under the insurance after some time. So a balance of risk, delivery and risk, the key elements. Moving forward a little bit, and I'll speed up. Well, I won't speed up, but I'll just jump ahead a little bit. Under the Incoterm CIP, if you were shipping by air, again, you should not really be using the Incoterm CIF, airport of destination. Really, the correct rule will be CIP, cost insurance paid named place, which could be an airport of destination. Seller is responsible for the carriage, paying the air freight charges to the airport of destination. Importer responsible for all import clearance formalities, etc. But delivery and risk, the seller actually delivers when the goods are handed into the custody of the first carrier at the airport of departure. So if I was shipping from Dublin by air, carriage by air from Dublin, the risk would transfer at Dublin when I get the customary transport document, and it's an air shipment, so an airway bill. Seller pays the freight cost to the airport of destination, CIP, cost insurance paid, name, place of destination. Now, it's getting a little bit more interesting because now we're going to the new, not so new, one of the new Incoterms in the Incoterms 2010, and this was delivered at place. Delivered at place, and I have a lot of comments coming in and questions, so if you don't mind me. Okay, very good. Oh, I was asked the question, is China the only country using FOB? Okay, FOB, and the answer is no. FOB is used extensively all over the world. Very good. Next quick question on FOB again. Everyone likes FOB. Is when does title transfer? I guess title means ownership of the underlying goods. When does title transfer from seller to buyer under FOB? A good question. It needs a good answer. Well, the answer is never. Okay, but let me explain. That was to shock you. The Incoterms rules do not deal with title to the goods, as in when ownership transfers. There's an assumption because the goods are delivered under FOB when they are placed on board the vessel. Risk transfers when placed on board the vessel. There's a presumption, but it's incorrect, that the rule specifies title transfers. You need to expressly and clearly agree in your international contract transfer of title or ownership of the goods. And we haven't time here, but I would recommend a retention of title clause to be included in your international contract. Just FOB as well. Is it ideal to use FOB terms in letters of credit? Well, you know, what is ideal? It depends on whether you're seller or buyer, but I think I know what you're asking me. Under the Incoterm rule, FOB, the seller must deliver the goods on board the vessel at the port of shipment, but of course the buyer is responsible for the carriage, for contracting for carriage. So if he's contracting for carriage with the carrier, well then there may be a difficulty for the seller to get his hands on the marine bill of lading. So that could be a complication, but in day-to-day business with counterparties who are doing ongoing business, this does not surface as a problem. Okay, yeah. Interesting question. Can CIP, which I explained, be used for break bulk cargo? Yes, CIP can be used for break bulk cargo or any other cargo, but traditionally we will be using CIF because break bulk will be going by sea, marine term. Okay, and somebody asked me about, sorry, I hope I'm not going on too long, just to make sure I answer all your questions. Someone asked me about transshipment charges under CIP. Very good question. CIP transshipment. Now, remember my example, CIP, Dublin to Dubai, cost insurance paid to Dubai, goods going by air. Well, let's say the goods were transshipped, okay? Dublin Airport, Heathrow, LHR, DXB, okay? Well, the question is about the transshipment charges. Well, these charges under CIP are for the seller. he absorbs those seller's charges. He is responsible for absorbing those charges. But of course, in practice, if I know these charges in advance, I will build them into my end sales price between the seller and the buyer. Then we're asked about terminal handling charges, and this is something that has occasionally caused challenges with the CIP. Okay, if it's CIP, it's not really a big issue, because if goods are going by air, okay, the seller is responsible for carriage of the goods to the airport of destination, and all charges after that are for the account of the buyer. Someone has asked, the questions are relevant, why use DAP instead of CIP? Well, let me explain DAP first, and then we will come back to your question. DAP, CIP. Well, obviously it depends on whether you're seller or buyer. But let's first stay with our example. You are the buyer in UAE, I'm the seller in Ireland. Why use DAP instead of CIP? Very good question from you. But let me explain first. Under DAP, if I was shipping by air to Dubai, as in our example, I would be responsible for the carriage of the goods to the named place of destination, DXB, Dubai International Airport. But this time, the risk in the goods and delivery of the goods does not happen on the export side. Now the seller is responsible for delivery of the goods at the named place of destination, DXB. So now the seller is taking on more risk. And of course, the seller may actually increase his cost as a result. Import duty, charges, taxes, if applicable, are for the account of the buyer. Unloading charges, again, for account of the buyer. But let me be very clear. Strictly under the DAP rule, delivered at place, strictly under the rule, the seller is not responsible for unloading of the goods at the named place of destination. So to answer your question, as it's coming up, and we have some questions at the end coming up as well that we have pre-advised, dare I say, questions, but these, as you're spontaneous, I'm trying to be spontaneous too. You're the buyer. Why use DAP instead of CIP? Well, it's up to you, but here may be an answer. Under CIP, the seller delivers when the goods are placed in the custody of the carrier in Ireland. But under DAP, I am responsible for the delivery of the goods to the named place of destination, Dubai. So I don't want to be too dramatic, but right now in the COVID situation where flights are opening up, but they're not really opened up yet, DAP will be better for you as the importer, because under the contract, I am responsible to deliver the goods in Dubai. If there's no airplane flying, it's my problem. Whereas under CIP, if I was able to deliver the goods into the custody of the carrier or the carrier's agent, or dare we call it the first carrier, it will be your problem or risk. In fact, that answer came out better than I thought it was actually going to. So I'm going to move on a little bit. Now we have the new Incoterm, and our timing is pretty good, okay? And we have more questions and comments, many coming in, and they're very good. But just to explain, the new Incoterm basically that we have here is DPU, okay? DPU, delivered at place U, unloaded. So basically, it is kind of an extension of the DAP. So I'm in Ireland shipping the goods to you by air, for example, in Dubai. I'm responsible for the carriage of the goods to DXB. The risk transfers at the named place of destination. So the risk stays with me, and I'm also responsible for all costs. But strictly under the DPU rule, the seller is also responsible for the unloading charges at the named place of destination. So I'm responsible for unloading. But you know, in my example, it's not so important, because usually unloading charges in air shipment is included in the air shipment, so it's not so important. Oh, but my friend here has asked another question about break bulk. Okay, break bulk. Can we use DPU for break bulk? And you can use it for break bulk, you can use it for commodities, you can use it for any mode of shipment. And now again, this is your third question. It's a very good question. The unloading charges with break bulk or commodities is really important, okay, because they can be significant, where in air shipments, don't hold me down on this, it's not that important. But under break bulk, it is really important. So under DPU, the seller would be responsible for these unloading charges at the port of destination under DPU. But of course, I've asked a question about import clearance. That is the responsibility. That is the responsibility of the buyer. So bear with me. I just having a look again at the questions and the chat. Okay. Yeah, can CIP be used for LCL, FCL? Yeah, for full container load, less than container load, no problem. Let me keep going, just see what's on. Yeah, okay. Under FCA, yeah, we've covered that. Okay, just let me go down. About the rock issue, okay. Okay. Oh, good question here. You know, about the rock issue, and this goes back to my CIF Gdynia port query, and I'll read out the question exactly as I got it. About the rock issue, what if there was no LC? Will the buyer have to pay the full invoice anyway? Okay. And then claim under the invoice. So let me repeat that question. It's a really good one, especially in the current environment. About the rock issue, CIF, name, port, and destination. What if there was no LC, no letter of credit? Will the buyer have to pay the full invoice amount anyway? Now that's a really good and searching question. So technically the answer is this. Under the Incoterms rule applicable to this contract, agreed by the seller, the buyer 100% has an obligation to pay. But that's not really your question. So to answer your real question is they have an obligation to pay. But if there's no, if they have an obligation to pay, but there's no letter of credit or no standby letter of credit, which are growing in use extensively right now at the moment, I remember I was joking, well, I don't want to pay for a rock. I want cement powder. So I have an obligation to pay, but as we can just expect, it could be tricky getting your money. And I don't want to get into legal issues that will expand this out. But if he's not paying, then you need to take legal action. Okay? And then it will depend on the applicable jurisdiction where you take that legal action. So as I think you're feeling when you ask that question, it could be a problem. Okay. Okay. Someone just asked me to explain the difference between CIP and CIF. And I've kind of done it, but just the key point one more time. Okay. CIF is strictly marine term or inland waterway. So think about ships. CIP is air shipment, truck shipment, even marine shipment, multimodal. But here is the key difference, and I hope you're ready for it. This is the key difference. The key difference is where exactly delivery occurs under CIF and CIP. And here is the answer to your question. Under CIF, strictly under the rules, delivery transfer of risk happens when the goods are placed on board the vessel at the port of shipment. Okay, CIF. Under CIP, the risk delivery is in concept a little bit earlier, in that under CIP, the seller delivers the goods when they are handed into the custody of the carrier, the first carrier or their agent. So this, of course, could be before the goods are shipped on board. It could be, for example, if you are shipping via containers, the goods are shipped, are delivered to the container yard. They're received by the carrier, the first carrier. So the risk typically transfers that little bit earlier. So to answer again, CIF placed on board, CIP when placed into the custody of the carrier. Oh, very good question again, and I'm watching my time. And Habib, if I go off time, you please call me and come back. But question, in DAP, who was responsible under the rules for insurance? Very good question. Now, under DAP, seller delivered at place, you kind of assume it's the seller, okay? But under the rules, there is no express provision. It just makes it clear the seller is responsible to deliver at the named place of destination. Whether he insures or not, It's his decision unless otherwise expressly stated in the contract. But under the rule, and a very good question, there is no provision. For DPU term, the custom clearance is for account of the buyer, just as it is in DAT. This is your comment in the chat. You said it better than me. Custom clearance, import formalities, the same. Okay. Oh. Now, here's a question, and I'm not sure I know how to answer it, but I'm going to try. What about temperature controlled shipment in case of air shipment? Who's responsible in case of variation of temperature which create damage while the goods are being shipped? That's a good question. So, you know, sometimes it happens. Like every question so far, I have been very precise in my answers. This one, please forgive me, I may not be quite as precise. But here's my answer. The goods are going by air, right? Right. Okay, the goods, I don't know much about temperature control, but the goods are basically being temperature controlled, maybe kept cool. It's flowers. Flowers going to Dubai from Ireland, or maybe our beautiful vegetables here are flying to Dubai, as I know they are. Okay, so the aircraft is temperature controlled, probably low temperature. Okay, so the key question is, when has the seller delivered the goods? When does the risk transfer from the seller to the buyer? And you mentioned the Incoterm CIP. Well, my answer is, if you don't state otherwise in the contract and express provision regarding who is responsible in terms of temperature control, etc., the answer is, once the seller delivers the goods to the carrier, the first carrier, but that's in Dublin. So if something goes wrong with the temperature control and there's no other provision in the contract, my answer, and I said this is not as precise as my earlier answers, is it's the responsibility of the buyer. So now, my friends, I'm just going to move back to the presentation again. A DAP, as we said, delivered at place, unloaded, and this Incoterm, just to remember, it's kind of theoretical, but it's interesting in a conversation. DAT has been replaced by DPU, or maybe I should say DAT has evolved into DPU. Why? The reason is that DAT delivered a terminal, a very successful Incoterm, but it was felt that the scope of operation was too narrow. So the concept in DPU is very, very similar, almost the exact same, but it expands it out to a terminal or any other named place of destination. And then, my friends, we are at the end of the 11 Incoterms, and I'm about 3 times, so please forgive me, okay, because then we will have some quiz, questions and answers. But before we have that, my friend Habib, but let me finish. My friend Habib will take you through some poll questions so we get your feedback. Now, DDP is the maximum obligation from the seller to the buyer. Under DDP, it's delivered, duty paid, name, place of destination. So the seller is responsible for everything until the goods are delivered into the custody of the buyer at the named place of destination. It's not covered in the Incoterm, but very often the buyer will be signing a POD, proof of delivery, and indicating whether the goods have been received in good order or not. So DDP, name, place of destination, carriage for the seller, risk for the seller, and it includes any import clearance or customs duty, if applicable, for the account of the seller. So my dear friends and so many participants, we are now at the end.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Brien, for such an informative presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen, Davsa, thank you, Rashid, for being here. Thank you for making this happen. And we look forward to you joining us and working together, developing rules of practice. Thank you, Rashid. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vincent, and thank you all for attending. Have a lovely day.
ICC UAE makes it possible. Founded in 1919, our mission is to make business work for everyone, every day, everywhere. The International Chamber of Commerce, United Arab Emirates.